Miro Polo, Sweep Out, The Broom Boom Countdown, a spoofik.
Sweep out!
Hey, what's a spoofik, you'll ask? Well, I can explain. Spoofik is a word mix of spoof and fiction. Author Nick Underwood first used the word in 2080. He felt that his novel, The Galaxy to the Left of the Blackest Hole of All Time, didn't fit into any known genre. So he simply invented a new one, the spoofik. Well, and this is one too, a spoofik.
Sweep out!
Hey, before we start, look! Anywhere down here you can subscribe to my channel. This is a small click for a man, but a giant leap. Well, you know. Episode 1. Trouble with the Boss. 2094. That has really not been a great year for me so far. No girlfriend in sight, first signs of hairless, bad weather on vacation, great weather when I had to go back to the office, moving to a tiny house because everyone thought it was cool, but the only cool thing is my feet every night because the bed is tiny too. Always the same routine in the office. After graduating, I still believed in a career and thought it was super cool to get a job at the World Institute for Astronautics, Space Research and Space Policy. But if you think I'm going to space, you think wrong. No, I sit in the office of the equipment department and buy what spaceships are equipped with before they embark on space expeditions.
Sweep out!
The equipment department is responsible for almost everything that is important during a space expedition, from food to consumer electronics, vehicles and airplanes, if landings on planets are planned, building materials, if stations have to be set up, rescue equipment, medical technology, medicine and much more. And I am responsible for cleaning equipment.
Sweep out!
Well, it's not as uninteresting as it sounds. Cleaning equipment in spaceships are computer-assisted, super automatic machines that clean, wash, dispose of waste, disinfect and, just as an example, also destroy vermin. And all this under the conditions in a spaceship. In my tiny house is this done by a medium-sized household robot. Well, it's enough for me and my tiny house, but of course not enough for spaceships. There are hundreds of requirements that result from the fact that such devices must be able to cope with every conceivable dangerous situation in space. Nobody wants to be responsible for a few hidden spiders escaping from one of our spaceships on another planet and mutating into super monsters.
Sweep out!
I'd rather not imagine the trouble I'd have in my neck. I've got enough trouble as it is. I've been doing this for 5 years now, sitting in an open plan office in the equipment department, ordering cleaning machines for each expedition and monitoring that they are installed on time. But sorry, you don't even know who you are dealing with. My name is Alfred. Alfred Mayer. Fortunately, only the HR department knows me by that name. Most others say Alf. Well, as I said, most of them, someone does not. My boss. If it gets really bad, he gives my full name. By the way, who are you most angry about? Your wife? Well, that's not a case for me. And second, your boss. Oh, I see we get along right away. That's just like me.
Sweep out!
And you probably know today's annoyance. You work hard all year and then you get an appraisal and it's just mediocre. That was the case for me this year and admittedly also in a few years before. Why? Oh, why I had a mediocre rating? Well, I think it's an occupational hazard in the equipment department. I'll explain that. This risk results from a huge gap between the requirements of the astronauts, which of course cannot be high enough, and the budget that is available for the expeditions. I believe that there are no word combinations from the word budget on the one hand and words like high, sufficient, generous at all. Which budgets are already high, sufficient and generous? Then it wouldn't be a budget. Budgets are always tight, insufficient and frugal. But astronauts are a special species, high achievers who are difficult to get down to earth. None of them care about something as trivial as budget. Hey, We save the world and you talk about budget?
Sleep out.
When astronauts talk about the experiences of their last expeditions, they are, of course, very different, but everyone agrees on one point. The equipment department has once again failed completely.
Sleep out.
The foods are always too spicy or too tasteless, cleaning machines too loud, consumer electronics too cheap, clothes too monochromatic, shoes too heavy, and so on. There's always someone to blame when space expeditions don't meet their goals. It's always us, the outfitters from the equipment department.
Sleep out.
The last Venus expedition, for example, come back without Venus soil samples. And the expedition report said, because of the excessive noise pollution from the vacuum cleaner facilities, as a commander I had to give the order to leave the command center during the cleaning process. After the cleaning work was completed, the schedule had progressed so far that the order to collect soil samples had to be abandoned. Is it okay? Or an expedition near Uranus left its prescribed path and was temporarily lost. After the astronauts were rescued, it turned out that the diarrhea epidemic, which was believed to have been caused by overly spicy spices in the food, had caused such chaos that the spacecraft deviated from its intended route. The justification stated in the report. The exact cause are currently still being investigated. Apparently, however, the onboard computer was so overburdened with organizing the disposal of the escalating organic waste that functions essential for steering the ship were switched off. Because the staff on duty on the bridge had to leave the bridge very often due to the effects of the disease, the problem was noticed too late. Well, as I said, in the end, it is always someone from the equipment department who is to blame, and often enough it hits me.
Sleep out.
The following event was decisive for my current mediocre assessment. Let me tell you. I still remember very well the report of an astronaut. She wanted to tell a little story to make it clear how poor the equipment of the spaceships was. She began. She was said to be the duty commander and with her co-pilot on the bridge when the co-pilot reported an unidentifiable dangerous situation on the ship. A few seconds later, the onboard computer gave the alarm. This only happens if all attempts by the onboard computer to solve the problem on its own have already failed, and a critical situation is to be feared, she explained, and illustrated this with deep worry lines and an overall dramatic facial expression. The criticality was confirmed when an alien flying object was identified in the vicinity of our spacecraft. A few seconds later it turned out to be the escape pod with the rest of my crew, the commander reported. We found out that the cleaning robot was out of control. He considered the crew a contaminant and had begun taking action to clean it up. The crew could only escape by fleeing. But that didn't solve the problem, because the cleaning robot identified more dirt on the bridge. We had to barricade ourselves on the bridge until we returned to Earth. After the emergency landing, we needed a spaceport counter-terrorist special unit to free us. The young woman tilted her head slightly, and I got the most reproachful look I had ever seen.
Sleep out.
The Institute set up an investigation committee. This came to the conclusion that the problem could only have arisen because the programming of the cleaning machines had been left to a new contractor for cost reasons, who turned out to be not up to the task. Since I had chosen the contractor, following my boss's instruction to just give the job to the cheapest one, it was my fault, which ultimately reflected in my assessment. Well, from today's point of view, I have to admit that my reaction at the time was wrong. You have to know that the astronaut was the commander of a waste freighter on the regular service to the moon, and that these freighters were not equipped to a high standard anyway. The fact that I mentioned this as a sort of exculpatory argument earned me an official complaint from the Astronaut Union. I was accused of having discredited the disposal fleet with discriminatory statements. My boss was summoned to his boss, who in turn to his boss, who in turn to his boss. Well, you can imagine how that went on.
Sleep out.
I just had my appraisal interview with my boss, and now I'm sitting at the PC and I'm annoyed. He didn't say a word about the fact that he was responsible for selecting the cheapest provider, and that there were of course unofficial instructions on how to implement saving targets, especially for waste carriers. Instead, I received a warning and a report on how hard my boss had to work to prevent my immediate dismissal. Well, I'm not going to get fired. So that you know what you may have to prepare yourself for in the next episodes, I reveal that the year 2094 unexpectedly held a number of changes in store for me. Actually, the word changes describes the events completely inadequately. They were epochal upheavals.
Sleep out.
In the next episode, the first developments are already in the offing. Be excited. Bye.